The roar of the Bering Sea had never sounded this violent. Waves pounded against the steel hull of the Saga, their echoes swallowed by the howling wind. The temperature dropped so suddenly, it seemed the air itself turned to glass. Jake Anderson stood at the helm, gripping the wheel with trembling hands as the storm bore down on his crab boat. Years of experience should have steadied him, but this night was different. This time, something inside him was cracking. The Saga had seen worse seas, but it had never taken on water this fast. Beneath the deck, pumps screamed and metal groaned. Every thud reverberated through Jake's chest like a hammer striking bone. Panic pulsed in his veins. The ocean didn't forgive mistakes, especially not here, in the heart of the Aleutian storm corridor. He tried to focus, to steady his breathing, but the air came in shallow bursts. He barked out orders, automatic words from muscle memory, but they didn't sound like his own. Each command echoed strangely, swallowed by the chaos. The deck lights flickered, casting eerie flashes across the foaming sea. The water kept rising. Inside the cabin, the radar showed a storm cell building faster than predicted. It was like the sea itself had decided to swallow them whole. Jake's eyes darted between the monitors, his reflection trembling in the glass. He could hear the panic of his crew outside, boots thundering on the wet deck, voices rising through the static of the storm. Then came the sound that every fisherman dreads, the unmistakable slosh of water breaching the lower compartments. The Saga was taking on water fast. Jake's chest tightened. A sharp pain cut across his ribs. His breath hitched. He knew this feeling, one he'd buried deep for years. The onset of a panic attack. But there was no room for weakness out here. Not when the sea demanded every ounce of focus. He gripped the wheel harder, knuckles white. "Hold it together," he whispered to himself. "Hold it together." But the sea wasn't listening. The next wave hit broadside. The boat shuddered violently, throwing loose gear across the deck. The lights dimmed again, and a haunting groan echoed from below. It was the sound of stress, the metal twisting under pressure. Jake's vision blurred for a second, his heart pounding too fast. The smell of diesel mixed with salt water filled the air. Sweat soaked his forehead, even as cold mist lashed his face through the cracked window. He forced himself to focus on the horizon, though it was nothing but darkness and waves. He had been here before. Storms, danger, close calls. But tonight, the weight wasn't just the storm outside. It was the storm inside his mind. He remembered his father's words, "The sill break you before it takes you." Jake had built his life around proving that wrong. But now, as the panic crawled up his throat, he wondered if the sea was finally winning. He shouted for his deckhand to check the bilge pumps. A voice came back, barely audible through the wind. "They're running full power." That meant one thing. The water was still rising. He stumbled from the wheelhouse, bracing himself against the doorframe as the boat pitched sharply to starboard. The freezing spray hit him like knives. The deck was a blur of movement. Men rushing, water swirling around their boots, crates sliding dangerously close to the edge. The Saga was fighting for its life. Ake dropped to his knees near the hatch, peering down into the darkness below. The sight made his stomach twist, water churning where there should be air. His breathing grew faster again. The pounding in his chest became unbearable. For a moment, the edges of his vision turned black. He wanted to yell, to tell his crew to keep working, to stay calm, but the words stuck in his throat. His hands trembled uncontrollably. The sound of the pumps lured into a dull roar, the storm's rhythm merging with his pulse. He felt the world tilt, then everything inside him gave way. Jake Anderson, captain of the Saga, dropped to his knees, gasping. The panic seized him completely. He couldn't move. He couldn't think. He could only hear the ocean's fury. Minutes, or maybe seconds, passed before someone reached him. He couldn't tell who it was. A hand on his shoulder, a muffled voice calling his name through the storm. He blinked hard, forcing himself back into the moment. He looked up to see one of his crew staring at him, eyes wide, terrified, waiting for orders that weren't coming. That look snapped him back. Jake gritted his teeth, forcing air into his lungs. He pushed himself up, gripping the railing so hard his fingers ached. His breathing came in uneven bursts, but his focus was returning, inch by inch. "Seal it," he finally rasped. His voice cracked, but it was enough. The crew moved again, scrambling to patch the leak with whatever they could grab. He stumbled back to the wheelhouse. The floor tilted under him like a drunk giant was shaking the ship. Every step was a fight. Inside, he slammed the door shut against the wind control panel. The gauges flickered, battery strain, pump overload warnings. He knew they were running out of time. His heart was still racing, but his mind was clearing. He had to make decisions. The sea wasn't waiting for him to recover. He checked the coordinates. If they didn't stabilize the Saga soon, the next wave could roll her completely. Outside, the shouts of his crew cut through the storm. The men were drenched, exhausted, but still fighting. They trusted him. That thought burned through his fear. Jake clenched his jaw, taking another breath. The panic hadn't vanished, but he could move again. He adjusted the throttle, trying to keep the bow facing into the waves. The Saga groaned but held its course. He radioed out a distress call, voice low and rough. The static swallowed half the message, but maybe someone would hear. Then, as if the sea was mocking him, another massive wave crashed over the bow. The impact rattled the entire ship. Lights flickered again. He could hear the metallic scream from below, one of the storage compartments buckling under pressure. The pumps were losing ground. For a moment, he felt that same cold hand of panic reaching for his throat. But he fought it down, focusing on one thought: not today. Hours passed like minutes. The storm refused to ease. The crew worked tirelessly, sealing leaks, resetting pumps, draining compartments by hand. Every time they thought they caught up, another surge of water found its way in. Jake's body ached. His head throbbed from the adrenaline, but his focus sharpened with each passing hour. Fear had turned into determination. At some point, the wind shifted. The waves eased slightly, their peaks glowing faintly under the gray morning light. The worst had passed. The Saga was still afloat. Jake slumped in the captain's chair, staring at the horizon. His hands still trembled, though the storm was fading. He had survived another night on the Bering Sea, but barely. When the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, Jake finally stood and looked down at his crew. They were drenched, exhausted, but alive. The deck was a mess, gear scattered, ropes tangled, water pooled everywhere, but it was still their home. He walked out, boots slushing through puddles, and met their eyes. No one said anything. They didn't need to. Every man there had seen the edge of fear in his captain's face, the same fear reflected in their own. In silence, they began to clean up. The sea had spared them this time. Jake leaned against the railing, staring out at the calm horizon. His chest still ached, but his breathing was steady now. He thought about everything he had lost: his friends, his family's legacy, the years of trying to prove himself. The sea had given him a purpose, but it demanded pieces of his soul in return. The night's panic wasn't weakness, it was the cost of survival. By afternoon, the Saga was moving again, slower but steady. The pumps had caught up. The engines hummed with the low, familiar rhythm that every fisherman knew meant safe, for now. Jake stayed at the helm, eyes locked on the water ahead. The ocean stretched endlessly, beautiful and deadly all at once. He knew the panic might come again someday. Out here it always did. But this time he wouldn't hide from it. He had faced the storm, faced himself, and found something stronger on the other side. The Bering Sea was merciless, but so was he when it came to surviving. As the saga pushed toward calmer waters, Jake allowed himself one small breath of relief. He wasn't just a captain tonight. He was a man who broke, rebuilt, and kept going. The sea roared behind him, but he didn't flinch. The saga had taken on water, but Jake Anderson hadn't sunk. The wind screamed across the open Bering Sea, tearing at the surface until it foamed and shattered into white chaos. The saga fought against the surge, her steel frame groaning like an animal under attack. The sky had vanished hours ago, consumed by the storm. All that remained was a whirl of black water and howling gray wind, and Captain Jake Anderson's shaking hands gripping the wheel. The storm had not been predicted to hit this hard. It came from nowhere, like the sea itself had decided to test every man aboard. The radar had flickered earlier that evening, warning of shifting fronts, but nothing could prepare anyone for what was coming. The deck below was slick, waves hammering its surface in relentless rhythm. Every few minutes, another crash of seawater slammed into the hull, and the vessel dipped, just long enough for Jake's heart to seize.